What's up, everybody? Thralls Metal here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Jammin John.
And we are back with some more album reviews because we took a whole kind of week off because it was 4th of July and like legit nothing came out, which, till you get it, like why put it out on a fucking American holiday where people are going to be just like drinking and fucking blowing up their fucking hands and shit. That does sound metal as fuck, but not the best time to release metal, I guess.
No.
But we are back and we have a cool album review for you guys because this one was one that I've been anticipating, and I was kind of surprised that this was an independent release because I figured this band would have been signed. But we are going to go over the latest offering from Viogression, Thaumaturgic Veil. This comes out on the 11th of July, again, self-released by the band. This band initially formed in 1989 in Wisconsin. They were kind of part of like a budding underground death metal movement in Wisconsin, along with bands like Mortiscald, Jungle Rot, Accidental Suicide. Small but very solid scene. This band initially was called Rape, which they changed that name after, I think, a solid year of going with that name and probably running into a little bit of feedback from people. It's like,
backlash, maybe.
Dude, why that? I don't fucking know. But they changed their name and in 1991 released their debut album, which was really awesome, Expound and Exhort. I think it's just kind of like an underground classic. And then broke up in 94 after their second album, and then kind of took a while to get back together. They put out an EP in 2014, and then they put out their long-awaited third album, Third Stage of Decay, which was also really sick. And thank you once again, Rick, for pointing me in that direction. Dreadful Minutes is always good for that. And for those that don't know, which probably would include him up until tonight, This is some gritty, old-school death metal that, I mean, it's definitely very 90s sounding, but it's a little bit like, I don't know, off-kilter. Maybe, I don't know, like a tad proggy?
Maybe in the construction of things, but I don't think I would necessarily call this prog. Yeah, up until today, I've heard of these guys before, but never really got into them. And then Nick said, of course, we're reviewing this album, and I was like, all right, shit. For the first time ever, I'm not going to go in completely blindsided. I'm going to check it out. I checked out Third Stage of Decay, which was pretty goddamn good. And to me, it had a lot of tropes of death metal that I enjoy, such as that 90s old school death metal sound, and I was like, all right, I'm sold, I'm in, here we go, off to the races.
Now this one started streaming as far back as the 8th, and I checked it out on Decibel because they were streaming the whole album early, which that's kind of a really interesting way to listen to it because they did a whole like visual AI thing to complement the whole playthrough, which is better than just having a picture of the album art and the track list. You know, sometimes AI doesn't suck.
I mean, obviously, we have a booger troll, you guys.
Yeah,
right. I mean, obviously, you know, it can't all be bad. And if you type the right words into AI, it does make entertaining shit. And the visualizer was kind of trippy, so...
Oh, it was pretty wild. And themed with each song, which was kind of cool. And I also read, you know, at least what the band would describe this album as, which, quote, they said, transcendental descent into the abyss of human neurocognitive system. And that sounds very in-depth and kind of crazy and honestly pretty close to what we got here. Now, when I saw this listed on the archives, it had 19 tracks, and I was like, oh fuck, are we getting into a double album? But then I saw it was 49 minutes, and I was like, okay, maybe we're not. And as I thought, this album has pretty much an interlude, sort of like atmospheric transitional track in between most of the tracks up until like the last two tracks, which are kind of back to back. Now, I did kind of groan, maybe sigh a little bit, just because it's like, oh god, here we go with the extra fucking fluff. And these interlude titles are gonna be hard to pronounce, even though we're gonna try. Like, honestly, after a while, they kind of sounded like, you know, the suburbs of fucking Middle Earth.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say a lot of these. A lot of these sound like, you know, the words that fucking, you know, Ash fucked up trying to get the Necronomicon.
Yep, yeah. Yeah, actually, that's very on point. I saw this and I said, 19 tracks. I said, come on, dude. I've been on overtime for weeks now. I'm not ready for 19 songs, but it works out. Normally interludes I find to be kind of boring or kind of like useless or
filler.
Filler, like not really necessary, but in the case of this album, much like we talked about in the beginning, how it has kind of a prog feel to it. Each one of these songs, actual songs on here, I would call very different. Like they all share a lot of similar tropes. They're all very evil and very kind of unsettling, but they have different elements. Now, before you get to the actual first track, you do have kind of a setup. Enuma Elish Lu Billie Eilish, maybe? I don't know. But I mean, it's creepy. There's a pulsing heartbeat. There's a bunch of voices. So again, very atmospheric, and it really sets up kind of the pace and the feel for this very unhinged record.
Yeah, it's kind of, I don't know, you get this like angelic kind of, crooning in the background. Honestly, the whole thing made me feel like I was like stuck on the DVD startup screen for like The Dark Crystal, which I love that movie, so that's not a dig. But yeah, then you get down to the song Jinx and thrashy, solid, nasty riffs. The production here is really solid. It still sounds very old school. It's just a little bit more crisp. Super fucking loud snare. Like, that's one of the first things I noticed. This dude, it sounds like he is like slamming a screen door. And, you know, initially I was like, I don't know, that might be a little bit loud, but I kind of got into it. But man, like this opening track, you know, it's a little bit more straightforward, kind of what I expected because I'm a big fan of their debut. You have a lot of, you know, like just gnarly 90s death metal stuff, and dude's vocals. This guy is somewhere between Chris Reifert and John Tardy, which god tier death metal vocalists in my mind, so I absolutely loved it. A lot of dramatic, you know, and all that. It's awesome, and it fits with the just awesome riff work on here. Like, this band is just in love with riffs. But as this album went on, it became more technical, more atmospheric. The songs became a little bit more wide-reaching. This album, in terms of like saying death metal has a palette, this kind of goes all across it. You have, you know, elements of like more cavernous, kind of like doomy death metal on here. You have some more thrashy stuff. You have that good old solid, like, double-time groove bass, like, obituary, bull thrower stuff on here. You even have some tinges of black metal every now and then. And in terms of, like, the construction of the songs, it's a little bit technical. Like, this first song, it has its roots in, again, like, obituary and shit, but there's, like, an atheist, like, tinge to it.
Yeah, I think the atheist comparison is good, again, for the construction of these songs. Like, I wouldn't sit down and say that any of these songs necessarily sound like atheist. Like, it's not proggy in that sense, but it's not a typical verse, chorus, bridge, breakdown type of thing. It's kind of like they're all over the map. And I will say that initially, how transition happy this record is got to me a little bit, but by the time you get to the end of this record, it kind of makes sense. Each song is uniquely different from one another, and again, it's just down to the construction. I will say that I do like how most of these songs open, because they really, really sock it to you in the beginning. Like the beginning of Eaten by Flies, per se. Just immediately pummeling, slow, lurching riff. But all of these songs, once they get past the intros, just open up into like a free-flowing, like, stream of consciousness almost.
Dude, it's like you're kind of like locked in a hurricane of riffs. And yeah, the stream of consciousness thing, it kind of works in a way because the songs are a little bit unpredictable. Like, they definitely have their repeating parts, but it's not repeating in the sense, again, of like a chorus or anything like that. You just revisit, you know, like some killer riffs, which, I mean, honestly, if you got killer riffs, fucking visit them. Like, this band is all about fun, just catchy riff changes. Volnus Sclopatarium. I have no idea what that is. I didn't do well in human anatomy and biology. I don't know if that's like a dangly bit in the innards of, you know, it's not the uvula. I know that.
Had I not flunked biology, I never would have met this guy. So that's where I'm at.
I sucked at math. That's how I met him. But this song almost kind of encapsulates the album in general in terms of like stylistic and riff changes. Opens up with dissonant, cold strumming. It almost feels very blackened. And it's got this really fun build up with the drums. You get this like stuttered kind of like groove pattern. And then it just goes right into blasts. You get thrashy chugging. There's this really cool, like, you know, fun, like off time kind of like, I don't know, it's almost something you would hear in like just 90s metal across the board, whether it was like 90s death metal or something like Fear Factory or Prong.
Yeah.
But this song is just riff transition after riff transition. Sometimes they're playing the same melody. Like there's a part where they get in this like, you know, kind of like descending doom sort of like harmony. And then they, you know, pick it up. They kind of double time the drums and add a tremolo to it. And this gets to one of like the most brutal sections on the album where they slow down to like a brutal death metal, like chromatic fucking chug, like, you know, dying fetus suffocation levels of heavy. And then they half-time that bitch and it gets even heavier. And then after that, they just get into another swirling fucking riff storm. But all this, it doesn't feel like just riff salad. It feels really well constructed. The transitions on here, whether they are sharp and jagged and just kind of abruptly shooting off into another section, or like methodical in terms of like a really cool like turnover into it and a little bit of atmosphere or a vocal break, the album flows really well. And as much as I bitch about interludes, it flows really well with the interludes.
Each of these interludes sets up each of these unique songs. And it's always something kind of creepy. You get a lot of creepy whispers, a lot of like demonic whispers going on. There's crying, there's moaning. In the song Buki's Dream or Bukaki's Dream, I don't know. There's a baby crying. You get times where there's a guy yelling in a tunnel. You get Siri talking to you about God knows what. But I noticed that in most of these where there is melody present, the melody is actually appearing in the next actual song.
Yeah, there is like stuff that like thematically does tie the interludes to the songs, which kind of keeps it from feeling like, you know, a little bit stock. I will say that a couple of them do feel like just like a little bit, you know, like kind of ordinary, like stuff you'd expect in terms of an interlude, like Akara on Casa, sure. I don't know if I said that right. A lot of glitchy static and unsettling waves of ambience. And Eternitas Avum is like shimmering sci-fi synths, and I don't know, it sounds like you're about to like jump on Space Mountain and you have taken way too much LSD.
I don't know, to me it sounded like meditation music. Like I sometimes use meditation music to fall asleep at night because I work crazy hours.
Well, your experience at Disney World was different than mine.
It was, dude. A little girl puked right in front of us in the line through It's a Small World, and that kind of was my Disney experience.
It's a small hurl after all.
Oh, man. But that kind of ties into thematically what this record is about. If it's about human neurocognism or whatever it is, I don't know. He just told me and I forgot, but it doesn't matter. If that's what it's about, meditation music makes sense.
Maybe. I don't know. Like, for me, this kind of runs like, all right, like you're about to go to bed and you're like, all right, I'm just going to, you know, chill out. And then your brain decides, you know what, now's the time to think about everything. Like, you remember that movie you watched when you were 8 that terrified you and you ran out of the room screaming? Well, now we're going to think about that.
Yeah. Remember the time you pooped your pants in 2nd grade? Yeah, we're going to think about that too.
You remember how horrible the news was on any given day this year? We're going to think about that too. It's kind of like that. It's like overwhelming, like jumbled thoughts kind of coming together. But musically, like, it really kind of works here. And this sort of stream of consciousness, like riff writing on here is awesome. And again, the fact that these songs are very different from one another, I think is just fucking awesome. It makes every song stand out. Like Travesty of Darkness, one of the most menacing dark songs on here.
Evil. That
sinister, distant riff that opens up and like a spoken word underneath it, it feels ominous and dark. The way that riff crawls in particular too, it has this sort of like slithering sound. And then when the blast beats come in, it's almost like the fucking strike from this fucking evil devil snake or whatever. I don't know, snakes are fucking terrifying.
Well, and at this point in the game too, this is where it becomes also a little bit more loose and a little bit dynamic. Like up until this point, the record is very straightforward, I found. Like most of the beats, you either get a blast beat or you get a rock beat or a D beat. And even the transitions, like, there's not a whole lot going on by this point. There are a bunch of, like, stylistic switches, but it's still very straightforward. But by the time you get to Travesty of Darkness, it becomes a little bit more loose. There's a little bit more going on in the drum beats. Like, it's got these cool, like, stuttered hitches going on in the drum beat. And from this point on, the record really opens up. Like the track that follows it after the interlude, the track that follows it, Pummeled, probably like one of the most unhinged pieces of work on this record. You get machine gun start-stops, you get machine gun riffs, it gets a little bit punky, like there's grindy shit fits in it, it's got a little bit of hardcore flavor to it. Like this is kind of all over the map, and this is kind of a great descriptor of what this record is.
It's interesting that song, the intro that sets that one up, Hedjet Sakulum, sure. It almost kind of sounds like, you know, samples from like a Middle Eastern bazaar, like the shops. Like everyone's, you know, haggling over the price of a flying carpet. They don't have those there. But there were some like more Middle Eastern melodies that did show up a little bit later in the album. I feel like that one, like Pummeled, kind of breaks it up a little bit because Superposition, there's like legit Middle Eastern like guitar harmonies there. Honestly, a little bit of like Nile sort of flavors in there, albeit like not as blazing fast, like way more groove laden. But this album definitely takes you to like different settings, and you can kind of feel the mood shift and change with a lot of these songs. We brought Eaten by Flies as this kind of like gloomy, like nasty opening, but when it gets to the bulk of the song, it's kind of a punky, filthy two-step. And for as like cerebral as this album is, this is probably the most like, you know, meat and potatoes, straightforward kind of autopsy gut stomp of a song that's on here. Like musically, it's to the guts. Up until you get to the bridge where it starts getting a little bit more melodic and a little bit more, you know, atmospheric. And melody is really good about like sneaking in here. Like a lot of this, again, is just very dingy sounding, but really awesome melodic lead work, really good guitar harmonies on here. It makes the album like a little bit more immersive, like there's more things to pick up on. But then you get into As the Light Fades, which is one of the strangest tracks on here. Completely on its own weird island. You get this awesome bass line, which when you hear the bass isolated, it sounds fucking great. It's slower, and the whole vibe of the song is it's drunk. And Wisconsin, no one touches Wisconsin when it comes down to fucking alcohol consumption. It is the drunkest state of the union, and they're fucking proud of it. And this song sounds like it was on a bender, and it's kind of like just perfect for that. Like, you have a lot of these elastic riffs, there's a lot of bends and lurches. The drum beat itself, how it follows the bass line, it has this little like stuttered fill towards the end of the rhythm, which sounds like a drunken stumble. And it's great. I mean, you know, like at this point, the vocals sound like the dude retching into the night, like behind the bar, like, listen, they're going to cut you off soon, bud. But it has its own vibe. It has its own appeal. The melodies on it, again, it has something unique about it. And all these songs, I feel like, have stuff that just stands out about it. And I thought it was kind of cool that the last two tracks were, well, interlude free. They just kind of went right forward with Summon and Light Harvester, which those two feel like they kind of complement one another, but they're very different songs. Summon is dark. It is just kind of gross and doomy. It legit crawls through the murk that it creates with its just, you know, just gross crawling melodies and such. It's got some good, solid, beefy riffs on it and some really sick, shreddy leads, but it stays just very menacing and slow. And then you get down to Light Harvester, and it's probably one of the fastest songs of the album. It's mostly blast beats, but you have sections where it shifts back to that kind of like doominess. And honestly, the melody on that song feels like it kind of mirrors the melody that shows up on Summon. So there's a lot of stuff on here where I feel like this was like really thought out and really meticulously paced. And honestly, it works. And this is like, again, like the kind of thing I generally bitch about with like tons of extra ambience and interludes and such. All these interludes are their own tracks. They could have been like an additional 30 seconds in front of the song, but I probably still would have bitched about that. But honestly, this album flows remarkably well to the point where, all right, I would remove maybe a couple of these interludes, but for the most part, I think they keep this album very fresh sounding. The songs can't run into one another because you have these little periods of ambience, and they feel like they're relevant to the songs.
And I think that's a really big help, and I think it helps keep the actual tracks very unique. Because I think without half these interludes, I think they would run into each other a little bit. I think you just get kind of lost in like this swirling euphoria, and you'd be like, I don't know what's happening here. But that breakup in between just helps your brain to kind of latch onto this new song, to kind of sink your teeth into each individual performance. As far as any negatives are concerned, I don't really have a whole lot. Again, while I thought it could be a little bit transition happy in the beginning, by the time the record went on, it made sense kind of more as to why you were doing that. Because initially you don't really understand how everything's set up until you get to like the midpoint, you're like, all right, I get it. And each transition that they cut to, I'm telling you, riff after riff after riff after riff, it's all pretty nasty and gnarly. Beyond that, there might be an interlude that I would cut, like a Dratha Akuru. I think that's how you say that. I don't know. It just sounds like a guy talking in a tunnel, and like it doesn't really lead into anything at that point.
It's like a carcass interlude without all the gore.
Yeah.
Like he wasn't talking about, well, I'm holding the spleen in my hand and smelling it. Yeah. You probably shouldn't do that. That's definitely an OSHA violation or something.
Yeah, but beyond that, I really don't have any gripes. It's a pretty damn good record.
Yeah, honestly, my only gripes were there might have been like too many interludes, and while some of them I think really do set up the next song well, and again, like they feel thematically linked, some of them I don't know, like they just didn't really grab me, or they didn't feel like, you know, they were really necessary. Like Amaranthan Karios, however you say that, there's like AOL dial-up, and I don't know, Siri starts talking and speaking and meditational gibberish. I don't know. It sounded like she was telling me, like, listen, your brain is all kinds of fucked. Yeah, I don't know. Try sleeping. But outside of that, this album is awesome. This is legit, gnarly, old school death metal, but it's very forward thinking. And overall, I'm going to give this 4 stars. This was a hell of a listen. Complex, but it doesn't come across as like, you know, too showy or too like, you know, pretentious or anything like that. Like, it's kind of that right level. It's technical in terms of like a lot of its transitions, and it's still got its like roots firmly planted in just solid death metal riffs. You know, 2 things that I love there, like some clever writing, but also I love meat and potatoes death metal, and there's still like just enough of it on here that it keeps the album very grounded and sort of like sailing off into the ether where all of these interludes lurk, apparently. I gotta say, though, if you're gonna jam this, definitely jam the stream on YouTube. Watch the whole visualizer thing. It is a really cool accompaniment to it, and there's some, like, visual relevance to some of the songs and such, which is, you know, actually kind of, you know, made me more engaged with this album, too. But I'm 100% gonna get this, and again, if you're a big fan of, again, like a lot of the Wisconsin, you know, death metal bands, Mortal Skull, Jungle Rot, Accidental Suicide especially, but also, again, like a little bit of Atheist, and I don't know, like, there's a lot of bands I could compare to, like, just in terms of, like, certain sections. Like, there's definitely death on here, both early death and later death. There's also, like, Incantation. If you just like creative death metal, just check this album out.
I'm going to have to agree and give this a good solid 4. This record is pretty goddamn entertaining. From song to song, it not only becomes more unique, but like each one of these songs takes on its own batch of character. It's that stream of consciousness, and normally that can be kind of confusing, but the way that this record is presented, it fits together quite nicely. The riffs, there are riffs aplenty on here. There's probably, I don't know, 60 to 70 different riffs going on here, and they all whoop ass. Everything sounds evil and sinister and dark. Again, you get blackened sections, you get death metal sections, you get blast beats, you get grind, you get thrash, you get all those things about death metal that everybody loves, all squeezed tightly yet neatly and well thought out into these songs. There are also tropes in here that I obviously love beyond old school death metal. There's a ton of dissonance, there's a lot of like really chuggy moments. Again, just most everything sounds stanky and dissonant and ugly and brutal, and I like that. But yeah, this is a very entertaining record. It took me a second to kind of grasp what was going on here, but as this record went on, I was more and more enthralled. Yeah, I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of time just talking here. Go out and listen to this record for yourself. It's very entertaining. Again, if you're fans of any of the bands that we've mentioned, Autopsy, I'm going to throw Autopsy in there too. If you're a fan of any of those bands, definitely check this out for yourself. I thoroughly enjoyed it.
So, if you enjoyed this review, give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to the channel, subscribe, because we do stuff like this all the time. We also have memberships. They are only 99 cents, and a Lone Perk Pursuing Game members-only live stream, which we have got to do here at some point, because we're kind of overdue for it, and yeah, we're going to get down to it. It's just, you know, rough work schedules and such.
Oh my god.
But membership is the main way to support the channel, and if you would like to join up, there's a join button down there, and you could tickle it with your Volnus Scolopitarium if you have one. I'm not judging you if you don't. I don't know. That might be a little dirty. Do it, you know, kind of on your own. Like, don't do that in front of everyone. You'll probably get arrested.
Even if you don't hit the join button, though, it's cool. I mean, if you don't hit it, you're not going to get a booger troll, and you won't be able to brag to your friends that you got a booger troll, and I can see how that would be unnerving for some. But, I mean, even if you don't hit the join button, we still do other non-members-only live streams, which are equally probably as stupid as our members-only live streams. Beyond that, we got album reviews, we got discography rankings. We are going to film At the Gates later this week. Again, work schedules have been crazy. Kind of had to push it back, but we're going to get to that anyway. Nick's Neverending Collection update. States of Metal. Is it metal? Is it not metal? The new Thralls of Metal greatest hits that go in tandem with the discography rankings. All metal, all the time. That's what we do here. We do it for you guys because we appreciate you being a part of this. Thank you for continuing to show up and be a part of Thralls of Metal. It is awesome. I never would have guessed in a million years that this channel would be as big as it is, but we couldn't do it without you. Thank you.
Yeah, you guys absolutely rule, and tons of content coming down the pipe. So one more big thank you, because you guys are awesome, and we will catch you later.